My poker session at Ocean's 11 Casino in Oceanside had a lot of action, big pots for a 2-3 game. Let's dive right into my hands and see if any of those pots headed my way. After folding pretty much every hand the first 3 rounds, I pick up pocket queens in the small blind. A player in middle position open limps, who I will refer to as call happy. I've played a few times with him before, and he likes to see a lot of flops. And he also doesn't really care about the bet size either. The cutoff and the button also limp, and I put in a raise to 25. I size it big here at 8x, because call happy isn't likely going anywhere, and I want to charge as much as possible. He does indeed call, as well as the cutoff. And this is a great situation for me because the pot is already huge and I can feel comfortable getting it all in here on most flops where I have an overpair. I see a king in the window, but then his beautiful queen appears right next to him. I bet out $60 with my set. I do think 70 would have been a little better because this is a draw heavy board where most people would either continue or fold with whatever hand they had. Unfortunately, both players fold, and we don't get a huge pot going with our big hand. Still a win, and a decent pot to start off. I pick up a big hand in the small blind once again with ace-king. 2 players in early position limp, and what I feel is a decent younger player raises to 20. The player next to him, who is very loose preflop, calls, and the action is on me. The problem with calling and seeing a flop with ace-king here is that if an ace or king does come, the raiser will most likely not pay me off if he has a lower pair like tens or jacks. With the pot already big and the raiser's medium chip stack, I feel it's an easy decision for me to raise and call it off if the original raiser goes all in. This is exactly what happens, and then we hit an ace on the flop. The player immediately shows his frustration. He didn't show, but he seemed to clearly have jacks, queens, or kings. His level of frustration led me to believe he had kings, but maybe not. Things are going our way early. Here I see 2 jacks, 6-handed, with the straddle on. I decide to raise it to 25. I could have made it 30, but the straddle is short stacked, and I for sure want action with this premium hand. Call happy calls in the big blind, and so does the straddler. The flop is great for pocket jacks with all undercards. Big blind checks, and the straddle bets out for just 30. So now I have 2 options. I can call and try to get call happy involved in the pot, or raise it here to get it all in against the short stack. Whenever I see players donk bets into the preflop raiser, they usually have a weak top pair hand or a draw. That range of hands will almost always call our raise on the flop, but they might check on the turn if they don't hit their draw, or if they see a scare card like an ace, king, or queen, if they happen to hold an 8. I don't want to allow villain to get away from either an 8 or be able to draw cheaply, so I raise it up here to 130. The big blind folds, and the straddler thinks for a little bit, but decides on a call. He tells us he has an 8, which is really good news since then he only has 5 outs against more outs if he had a draw. We do see a 9 and a 10 come, which is scary, but he ended up having 8-7 of clubs, so we scoop another pot, and things are rolling. I'm in the cutoff now with ace-king, and we open for 12. A little less since we are in late position and want action. Player calls, and call happy raises to 50, essentially saying he is all in. Players like him that are so happy to call and see a flop tend to only raise with very strong hands. With his stack size and our specific hand, we should either put them all in or fold if we're not getting the correct odds on the ship, since I'm assuming there's 0 chance he folds here. To calculate our odds, we add the pot of 77 to his remaining stack of 98 to get 175, since we'd be essentially playing for it all here. Then we'd find the amount we would need to put them all in, which is 148 minus 12 equaling 136. Then we divide that 175 by the 136 to get 1.29 to 1 odds. So let's go to Poker Cruncher to put in a range of hands villain can have to see if we're getting at least those odds. Absolute tightest range of hands I see villain doing this with is Jacks plus and Ace King. So let's start there and hit calculate. We see we're only getting 40% equity against that range and need to be getting 1.5 odds on a call. So if we put him on this range, we would fold here. But this range we're putting villain on is incredibly tight for a 3-bet squeeze to my cutoff raise and then having a button call. I truly thought villain would raise here with at least 9s plus and ace queen plus. After calculating that, we see I'm almost even money and should make the raise here against this more realistic range. The range I think villain would actually raise and get it all in here would be maybe even a little wider at pairs 7s and higher and ace jack, ace queen, and ace king. This is when we actually start to be a small favorite against his range. Raising here seems to be clearly the right play, and we would expect to have about 50% equity against villain's holdings, and hopefully we win the flip. So that is exactly what I'm going to do. Getting a call, and then seeing a king on the flop, thinking this could be looking like a huge day for me. The opponent shakes his head and flips pocket jacks over, with also having a spade, so I'm not out of the woods yet. Turn comes a jack, and we're drawing dead. Can't win all the flips, I guess. Ace-king offsuit finds me once again, this time with the straddle on in middle position. An older lady open limps. She has been catching some cards and has been involved in a couple big pots, including the previous hand where all the chips went in on the turn, where she had a flush draw and hit it on the river to beat top 2 pair. I raise her limp to 30, then the player to my direct left, who just lost the last hand against that lady and rebought, quickly shoves it all in for 210. This same guy also lost pocket aces versus pocket kings against this same lady about half an hour earlier when a king came on the flop. I definitely got the feeling he was pretty tilted, and his shove definitely seemed like it was out of frustration. Getting almost 1.5 to 1 odds on a call, I plan on easily snap calling once the action is back on me. But to my surprise, the original limper calls cold. The lady also gives me one of these. I guess I call. I've seen this song and dance before. Toss my cards into the muck. What does she show? Pocket kings. Stacks the guy for the 3rd time in an hour. Now it's my turn with pocket kings, on the button with the straddle on. Action folds to me, and I make it 25. I want to keep people in the pot here with such a premium hand in position. I suspect call happy in the straddle calls, and he does just that. Flop is all low cards of 4-3 deuce, no flush draw on board. He checks, and I bet 30, a 3/5 size bet after the rake. I could have made it bigger against this player, but at the time I wanted to make it look like I had an ace high with the straight draw. He calls, good turn comes in a 9, and he leads very small for 40. I think he would do this with hands like pocket pairs 5s through 8s, pair and straight draw hands like 5-4, 6-4, ace deuce, ace 3, and ace 4, where he would call those if they were suited preflop. He could also be enticing with a straight or set, but I think it's pretty unlikely with the small bet sizing. 2 pair on this board texture is very unlikely, since he would have had to call preflop with 3 deuce suited, 4 deuce suited, 9-4 suited, which seems pretty loose even for this player. I decide to raise, thinking he has more drawing and weaker hands that I can get value from, and I don't want him to choose the price he wants to pay. I wouldn't have really liked a jam from him all in, but I would have called if he did, just given the size of the pot. He thinks for a minute and decides on folding, where he also said nice play with ace-king. So I feel confident this was a good play, because my opponent was contemplating a call with a weaker hand, since he didn't understand why I would raise an overpair in this spot and could be possibly bluffing. Another decent sized pot going my way. I see the pretty ace-10 of spades in the big blind and a few people limping ahead of me, and then the small blind raises to 15. I feel raising here would be turning my hand into a bluff. I'd rather call and expect this hand to go multi-way, or ace-10 suited plays very well. Plus, I'll be in position on the raiser and be able to better play ace-high flops, where I don't know whether he has me outkicked or not. Flop comes out great, 10 high with 2 hearts. I flop top pair, top kicker, and the small blind checks. I almost always feel I have the best hand here, because the small blind shouldn't check with an overpair, and the limpers don't have many 2-pair combinations of 10-6, 10-deuce, or 6-deuce. Really, just pocket 6s and pocket 2s beat me. I make a big bet of 50, knowing the lady is an action player on a hot streak, thinking she will call if she hit the flop in any way. She does call, everyone folds, and I see a 6 on the turn. This seems like a good card because she would miss with flush draws, and if she has a 10 with a weaker kicker, she will call another bet. I bet again pretty big for 125, and then she min raises me to 250. Not an easy spot for me here. She can easily have a 6, and we're almost drawing dead. The first thing I'm thinking is, would she raise a worse hand here, like King 10 or maybe even the same hand of Ace 10? She could be trying to figure out where she's at with those hands, or maybe she just thinks she's ahead. It's very hard to tell. But I do think that both of those are possible for this player. Next thing, would she sometimes raise with combo draws or even ace-high draws? So ace X of hearts, or 9-8 of hearts, 9-7 of hearts, or 8-7 of hearts. I saw her bluff earlier, so I also thought it was possible. I'm getting better than 4-1, so I decided on a call. Not sure if this was a good play or not, because she should have a 6 a large percentage of the time, but it could be also just a feeler bet, so it's hard for me to tell. I see a king on the river, and check with a plan on folding to a river bet, but she quickly checks back and shows us 6-3 of hearts. Very loose limp than calling of a raise, but she flopped huge with a pair plus flush draw, and then she hit trips on the turn to take the lead. Looking back, I think I would fold here, but it's hard to decide at the table when you don't know what the other person is thinking. I think I just got in my head that she's not very good, so I should call. This play, I feel, was definitely the most questionable decision of my night. One of the last hands I played was with ace-jack on the button. A couple early position players limp, and a very old guy raises tiny for $7. He has done these types of plays before, just not wanting other players to raise behind him. So I don't think at all he has a big hand here, because he raises much larger when he has those hands, not wanting people to draw out on him. I also see he started with a small chip stack of 100, so I take the aggressive route and raise wanting folds, but plan on calling if he goes all in, since his chip stack is so small, and I'd be getting such good odds on a call. I feel ace-jack off is a good hand to do this with, because it doesn't play too well in a multi-way pot if I call. I also have good blockers in the ace and the jack, and I have somewhat a decent hand I can call off with if he does go all in. I end up getting the result I wanted and take down the pot. That was my last semi-interesting hand of the 7-hour session. I ended up cashing out for $259 in profit. It was looking like it could be a huge day towards the beginning, but still it's pretty decent, and I'm very happy with the result.